So I wasn't ever planning on doing any videos like this, kind of off the cuff, discussing a particular film that just came out. I prefer to do scripted analysis, but there is a film that got me thinking about the modern state of movies and film criticism. The least likely film that I ever thought would, and that film is Cocaine Bear, of all movies. So I thought, since I'm working on a video right now and it's taking much longer than I thought it would, I would make a quick video about my thoughts on Cocaine Bear. When I first heard of Cocaine Bear, from the premise and who was involved in making it, I just kind of assumed it was a straight comedy. And I had like zero interest in seeing that. It sounded like a one joke movie. When I heard it was like a horror comedy and saw the trailer and everything, like I was like, oh, well, that's a movie I wouldn't mind seeing. But I did not expect it to be very good. Horror comedies are very rarely good. Just last month we had Megan, which was a horror comedy. Some people hate that movie with a passion, even though it's been pretty successful. Cocaine Bear is a better movie than Megan, I think. And it's getting a reaction to it that I find interesting. It's not a satire in the way that Megan is. It doesn't have like a target. It is more like a meta comedy, and it actually reminds me quite a bit of the movies of David Wayne, who is a director that Elizabeth Banks, the director of Cocaine Bear, has worked with. And his movies tend to be like dissections of comedy. His first movie as director, Wet Hot American Summer, got very, very mixed reviews, to put it kindly. I think mostly negative reviews, but like a few defenders when it came out. And the common thing was, what he's satirizing is already comedy. He's making fun of like teenage camp movies, and those are already comedies. So like, what's the point of doing that? But like, it seems like Elizabeth Banks is mining that same territory. And I didn't notice until I went and saw the movie, but the producers of the movie are Christopher Miller and Phil Lord. And they do both as like, well, they do as like writers, directors, and as producers, tend to like do things that are kind of like very deadpan meta comedies. And they didn't really promote the film as a production by them, which would make more sense, because I think that would prepare people for what they were going to see more. Like, if you know that it sounds weird, but if you know that the guys who made the Lego movie are the people who made Cocaine Bear, then you would get, oh, the entire thing is a joke. And Cocaine Bear is basically like a slasher movie where the bear is the slasher. And there is, in fact, a lot of shots that are very evocative of horror films from the late 70s, early 80s. The movie takes place in 84, but there's one shot of like the bear's paw coming through glass and grabbing someone's face, which is like straight up Friday the 13th, like Jason Voorhees coming in the window, grabbing someone. Seen it a bunch of times. That's the joke, is that it's a slasher movie, horror movie, where it's a black bear, and it actually begins with a text at the beginning of the movie about how harmless black bears are. There are several jokes in the movie, but like the movie itself, like the fact that it's a bear on cocaine, obviously it's one joke, but the movie does a lot with it. So what made me go and see Cocaine Bear, which was not a movie that I, was high on my list of seeing, is like the negative reactions to the movie were so extreme on Twitter that it made me want to go see it. And like, whenever I have to check out a movie that's making people freak out, the last movie that was the case was Blonde, which I didn't like Blonde, but at the same time, I thought all the people who are freaking out about this movie are insane because like it comes off like a bad attempt at doing a David Lynch movie to me. But Cocaine Bear is like even more baffling. Tweet that made me want to see the movie is one by Sophie Romvari, who is a Canadian filmmaker who makes short films, mostly documentaries. But her tweet says this: This is not even worth saying, but Cocaine Bear is bad in a whole new type of way that I don't think I've ever seen before. Chat GPT era filmmaking, something insidiously inept going on with this one. Now, she was surprised that the reaction from a lot of people to this tweet was, oh, I gotta go see this. Like, they were like, I have to go see this movie. Because she says in the first part of the tweet that it is uniquely bad. And everyone wants to see something that's, well, not everyone, but like a lot of people want to see something that's uniquely bad because it's unique. They want to see something like The Room. They want to see something like Troll 2. But the second part of her tweet, when she compares it to Chat GPT and then says it's insidiously inept, which I don't know what that means even. It's just like insidiously inept makes it sound like it's inept on purpose in order to grift people in some way or something like that. I don't even know what that means. But saying it's a Chat GPT era filmmaking makes it sound like it's bland. It's like put together by an AI. And this movie is not bland. Like whatever else you want to say about it. Like the tone of the movie, there are jokes in the movie, but like the tone of the movie is very deadpan and it's edited in an interesting way. There's a lot of meta stuff in the movie. A lot of times a joke will be delivered. It'll be very quick. It'll be a funny line and it'll smash cut away. Like normally when you have a funny line in a movie, you have like some breathing room for laughs. And there's not in this movie. The movie's jokes are not really treated like jokes, which seems to be a joke in and of itself. But there's also like interesting things as opposed to the beginning where it gives you the text about how harmless black bears are. There are like a lot of things because the movie's set in 80s, which I'm not sure if people properly contextualize this. 80s is Just Say No, Reagan era, about drugs. And there's a lot of meta jokes about that. A lot of stuff with the kids find the cocaine and like that whole thing there is like something that I was just shocked to see in a movie. The film is incredibly gory. It is the goriest film I have seen made by a major studio, which like this movie is partially seems to have been financed independently, and then the studio came in and supported the finishing of it and distribution of it. It seems to be because from the credits I saw all these grants they got. It is incredibly gory. It is like stuff out of Tom Savini, Romero era. There is one part where someone's eviscerated, which just looks just like something out of Day of the Dead, Tom Savini makeup, but it's all obviously done with CGI. And it's really kind of weird to see that stuff done with CGI. And it seems to be that they're trying to, because that's the thing is CGI gore has never looked quite right to me. And I've never warmed up to it. But here it's CGI gore seems to be made to look like old makeup effects, which themselves don't look entirely realistic. They just look more visceral and organic, which I think is why we accept them in movies more than CGI. Because CGI makes us think of video games or cartoons. And it's CGI made to look that way. And I don't know if some of how people are reacting to the movie is how gory it is. There is quite a bit of people complaining about how mean-spirited the movie is, which the movie doesn't feel mean-spirited to me. Once again, it's a horror comedy. It has a tone about it. You're meant to laugh at things that, like, really you're not, in real life, not supposed to laugh at. But, like, black comedy and horror comedies have always had this problem. I remember, like, when Fargo came out, many critics who complained they couldn't tell what was supposed to be funny and not funny. And that was a movie that won Oscars, was very acclaimed when it came out, and has since been considered one of the best American films of all time. But when it came out, they were like, what's with this tone? Like, why doesn't it have a consistent tone? There were still critics saying that. There are critics who say that about every dark comedy. So there are people who called Cocaine Bear the most tonally confused movie they've ever seen, which I think the movie is strange in its tone. It like reminds me more of something like Jim Jarmusch or Wes Anderson, but then it's a horror film that's extremely gory. And there are some odd editing choices in the movie. There's one late editing thing where it's like a flashback, but the flashback occurs right after the thing that happened. So they could have just showed you the thing that happened right in order, but instead they showed people arriving at a place and then flashback to on their way to the place. And like, it's a weird thing, and I don't know what the joke is there. But I never thought that was inept. I was like, this is obviously an intentional choice, but why? So I could see if someone saw Cocaine Bear and they were just always like, why is this way? Why is this like this? For 90% of the movie, they might hate it. I thought everything seemed very purposeful. The score, I've heard people complain about the score. Mark Mothersbaugh, the former keyboardist of Devo, did the score. He had previously done Wes Anderson's Life Aquatic, and he had done Thor Ragnarok. This is the best score from him I've ever heard. It kind of like emerges out of the general sound design. So sometimes like you're in a scene and there's ambient noise, and then the music kind of creeps in a way that you aren't aware of the music at first. You like just think like that's the noise of the scene, the ambient noise of the scene, and then you realize, oh, that's the music coming in. I've never really noticed that done so well in a movie before, and it really works for a movie where the bear is supposed to come out of nowhere and be anywhere. So like, I've never seen a movie quite like this movie. The closest thing I have ever seen to a movie like this is another horror comedy, which is like an 80s style horror comedy, a Canadian film called Psycho Goreman. And I think Psycho Goreman's a little better. But Cocaine Bear has a feel very similar to that the existence of the movie itself is the joke. And the frame of reference that you have while watching the movie, like you need to like kind of have some familiarity with the tropes of what the kind of movie you're watching, which in Psycho Goreman, like it not only makes fun of like 80s horror films and 80s sci-fi films, but in particular E.T., which is like a heartwarming family movie. And there's like no message of the movie either, which is kind of what's impressive about it. Like it's hard to think about a movie that came out and is so single-mindedly just about style that I have liked this much, because the style itself and the reaction it seems to be trying to elicit from you is the point of the movie. It's trying to just take all these things that you might have as reference points and like putting them in a blender and like twisting your head up to try to like get a different reaction out of you than it's ever been before. And it's interesting because it's like its influences are obvious, but it like is not like anything you've ever seen. With Elizabeth Banks said that she had 4 movies that influenced Cocaine Bear, and she said Jurassic Park, Evil Dead, Stand By Me, and Pulp Fiction. And I found like Pulp Fiction to be the most baffling one at first, but then I realized like, yeah, this movie, like Pulp Fiction, is a comedy. And it's about like reconfiguring. There's non-linear editing, making you laugh at things you're not supposed to laugh at, using violence to like puncture tension and turn to laughs. And Pulp Fiction is deconstructing the entire idea of the crime story and like the things you've seen a million times before. And Cocaine Bear is doing the same thing. So I was just like, oh yeah, she really knows what she's doing. Like when she like names those 4 films, it's just like Pulp Fiction doesn't like scream out at you immediately. But like, that's what it is. It's like this meta film. And like a thing I find disturbing is like the more original a film is and it finds an audience, the more you will see a backlash to it, which makes no sense. Because if you see a film that's completely original, it's not based on an IP. I'm even like encouraged when like say niche like Christian films. There's another film that opened this weekend called Jesus Revolution. Like it did way much better than they expected. And I was like, good, because like that'll keep theaters alive. And like I have no desire to see that movie, but I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it has an audience. I'm glad that they realize, like, yes, if you build something for an audience, they will come. And you'll see that with like a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is bizarre movie. I liked it quite a bit. It wasn't perfect for me. I thought it was a little smug in places and self-indulgent, but I really liked it. Some people don't like it, and I totally understand why someone wouldn't like it. Because, like, yes, I imagine some of the things that bothered me about, like the smugness and self-indulgence, if that really bothers you, like the movie would be unbearable. But like the kind of hatred people have for that movie, vitriol they have for it, makes no sense, because that movie making $100 million and being as successful as it was, as weird as it is, gives you hope for movies. And Cocaine Bear has given me hope for movies. And I don't understand, because the people who hate it, I don't understand them. But even the people who defend Cocaine Bear, they're just like, oh, it's just a silly movie. It's not. It's like, this movie, I don't think is just a silly movie. I think this movie is showing, like, first of all, Elizabeth Banks seems to like be coming into her own as director, and I hope she makes 20 more movies just like this. But like, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. Not quite anything. Like, has a lot of elements of things that I've loved and haven't seen forever. Like, a lot of like very gory late 70s, early 80s horror films, but then done in a different way. So this movie gives me hope for movies. And people who hate it, I really worry about them. But, no, that's, everybody has different tastes. Not every movie is for everybody. Roger Ebert, the film critic, once said he hated the phrase, this movie's not for everyone, because he said any good movie is not for everyone. The movies that are made for everyone are bad movies. And you see that kind of right now with the endless like recycling of IPs and franchise movies, just trying to get the widest audience whatsoever. Those movies are attempting to be movies for everyone, and they are god awful. We need more movies that are for specific audiences, that are trying to communicate something to specific people, that are trying to do something different. And Cocaine Bear is that type of movie.